Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our Facebook Live, where AMIDEAST Program Officer Anna is going to answer any questions that you have about the Fulbright Foreign Student Program. Before we get started, I want to remind viewers to ask any questions they may have in the comments below, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible in the next half hour. I'd also like to remind people to visit amideast.org/Fulbright. You can find out more about how to apply, application deadlines for each country in the MENA region, and more information about the program. We also have a frequently asked questions page that may help answer any questions that you have in the future. And with that, let's get started. We're going to start with the first eligibility question. Anna, if the questions come from an applicant, if I'm currently studying in the United States, can I apply?
Generally, the answer here is no. If you're on a very short study program and you're permanently based outside the US, then there's a possibility. But the Fulbright program is intended for students who have not spent much time in the US, and you would not be eligible if you're enrolled in a degree program here in the United States, like a bachelor's or a master's.
Great. Someone else asks, I live in one country, but I'm from another. Can I apply?
That, again, a lot of these answers are going to depend on the country that you're from. For the most part, you are required to apply in the country of which you are a citizen, and you are required to be living in that country on a long-term basis. There are a couple of exceptions for people with refugee status. Palestinian students, Syrian students sometimes are eligible to apply through Lebanon or through Jordan. But in other situations, if you just happen to be Jordanian but living in Egypt right now, you wouldn't be eligible to apply for Fulbright either in Egypt or in Jordan.
Can you apply as someone who is graduating from an undergraduate school this June?
Yes, if you're in the last year of your bachelor's degree and your bachelor's degree will be conferred before August of this year, or I'm sorry, before the start of the Fulbright program that you're applying to, then yes, you are eligible to apply. You would just want to make sure that you indicate that you are on track to finish your bachelor's before you are proposing to start Fulbright study in the United States.
And I want to add on that one, there are some countries outside the MENA region that do have requirements. You have worked for 1 to 2 years before you apply. So always check with your local Fulbright Commission or the office that you're applying through, or the US Embassy. Is there an age limit?
There is not. We would love for you to apply regardless of how old you are.
Can I apply with a disability?
Please do, yes. We are eager to recruit and bring Fulbrighters with disabilities or chronic health conditions to the US. We would encourage you to disclose your disability or your health condition as early as possible in the application process. It will not be used against you. It will not be considered, it will not be factored in when we decide whether or not to offer you a grant. But this is very helpful to us to be able to know what accommodations you might need, to make sure that we've considered the needs that you might have when you get here. So we do encourage you to disclose as early as you're comfortable doing, rather than waiting until the last minute. But that is helpful to us in order to help you. It's not used to exclude you from consideration.
Great, thank you. Is this program, the Fulbright Foreign Student Program, only for foreign citizens who want to study in the United States, or can it benefit those with American citizenship who reside outside the United States and who wish to study in the future at an American university?
So the Fulbright Foreign Student Program is for non-US citizens and non-permanent residents. Even if you don't live in the US right now, even if you didn't grow up in the US, if you have a US passport or if you're a permanent resident of the United States, unfortunately, you're not eligible to apply.
Right. This is a question, I think, mostly for our North African students. Does Fulbright accept licence degrees?
The licence is a 3-year bachelor's degree. You are welcome to apply with it. Your ultimate possibilities in the US would depend on the policies of the universities where you're applying. There are some US schools that accept a licence as equivalent to a US bachelor's degree. There are some schools that don't, but Fulbright is happy to consider your application and consider nominating you with a licence degree, yes.
Thank you. I'm a first-year master's student. Can I apply?
You would want to double check with the country that is where the country or the AMIDEAST field office where you're applying for your Fulbright grant. Often the answer is yes, you are eligible to apply. but you would want to make sure that in your personal statement, your statement of motivation for applying to Fulbright, first, please disclose that you are currently in a master's program, because again, we want to make sure that this program is going to be a good fit for you. And second, you would want to explain in your essays what you envision doing in a US graduate program in your field that you can't do or haven't done in a master's program in your current master's program. So US universities are very reluctant to admit candidates who look like they will just be duplicating master's work that they have already done. So we want to know that you have a clear idea of why you need or want a US master's degree in addition to the master's work that you're already doing.
I think that also goes to show for some people who already have a master's degree and are applying again to the Fulbright program for a second master's. We want to know why this one's different and why this one will really impact you and your career. Okay, our next session is on testing. I know there's a lot of confusion out there on the GRE and the TOEFL testing that was done before Fulbright, either while you're applying for Fulbright or once you become a nominee. And luckily, Anna can answer some of those questions. Should I or do I have to pass the TOEFL or IELTS before applying? Should I take the TOEFL now or should I wait?
So this does depend on the country that you're applying through or applying from. Some countries do require you to apply with a TOEFL score. Of those countries, some have a minimum score requirement and some don't. They just want to see what your current score is. And then at least a couple of countries don't require you to take the TOEFL before you apply to Fulbright. So if you are nominated for a Fulbright grant, that means moving from the applicant process to being selected basically as a semi-finalist. You're not guaranteed to come to the US, but we've selected you as someone we hope to bring. Once you reach that point, you will be required to take the TOEFL and any other required exams in your field. So the TOEFL you apply with is not your only chance to show your English proficiency, but some countries do require you to have it and to meet a certain threshold before you can be considered for nomination.
And Anna, for the semifinalists who are taking the TOEFL and the GRE, sometimes it's paid by Fulbright, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so you're not taking any out-of-pocket costs once you become a semifinalist. So that's just a good reminder for everyone. Is there an English language requirement or minimum score?
Again, it depends on the country. I know of at least one Fulbright country that does have a minimum TOEFL score requirement. I know of at least one or two others that do not. So we would recommend checking with the AMIDEAST field office or the Fulbright website for the country where you're planning to apply.
Similarly, is there a required or certain GRE score as well? Or GMAT if you're taking business?
There is not. Again, if you have the scores, we would like to know what they are. But if the GRE or the GMAT is appropriate for you in your intended field of study, we would give you the opportunity and the funding to take it again later in the application cycle. So we do encourage preparing ahead of time, especially if you are shortlisted for at least an interview. Even if you're not sure that you will be nominated, we recommend starting to prepare for the TOEFL, starting to prepare for the GRE or the GMAT, because that preparation ahead of time really helps your scores once you do get to the point of taking it.
Right. Is there also a GPA requirement?
Typically not for Fulbright. We are looking for strong students. We're looking for students that we can be confident would succeed in a US graduate environment. And so grades are one consideration when we are selecting nominees. But if you feel that the grades you earned in your bachelor's degree don't actually reflect your abilities, your qualifications, we would welcome you to explain that in your statement of purpose and explain to us, what else do we need to know? Why do you feel that you would perform better in a US graduate program than you performed in your bachelor's program? And some students have a very compelling explanation. Perhaps they've grown up and matured a bit since their bachelor's degree. But the personal statement, the essay would be your chance to explain factors like that to us. And there are cases where we will nominate someone whose grades are a bit weaker if we feel that they have potential to succeed in a graduate program in the United States.
Thank you. About the test records and application, if they do require a TOEFL score, is it mandatory to mention the future date for taking the test?
I would say, again, consult with the field office or the Fulbright Commission where you're applying. I know I keep saying that, but a lot of these things the small details especially are very specific to where you're applying or which office is managing your application. So that would be the best place to check for that item, whether you're required to have committed to a future exam or just indicate that you are willing to take it when necessary.
Do students who are coming to study English have to pass the TOEFL as well?
For English language programs, Fulbright doesn't sponsor English language training programs in the United States as such. We do offer some summer language training for nominees who have been placed into a graduate program in their field. Starting in August or September, we may ask or invite you to come to the US earlier or to join a virtual program this year to help strengthen your English scores, your English abilities, and therefore your test scores as well. But we don't sponsor students specifically to come to the US for English language training.
And I can add that we also do have we have students apply for master's degrees in teaching English and TOEFL, as well as in English literature. There is still a language requirement. You must take the exams, the GRE and the TOEFL for either of those programs. So there is no like waiver if you are an English student.
Right. And those programs would actually be especially interested in your English proficiency. If you're coming to study how to teach English to others, they want to see that you have very strong English skills of your own. Or if you're coming to study literature, they want to see that you have the language skills to understand and interact with literature in English. So yes, those programs in those areas would be especially interested in your English proficiency.
Is it okay to take the at-home version of the GRE?
The at-home GRE is brand new since the pandemic started. We're not quite sure what the long-term outlook is going to be. So if you have the opportunity to safely take the on-site GRE, that would be our recommendation. If you are required to take the GRE for your Fulbright application and you don't have access to an on-site GRE exam, or you're not comfortable going to take the exam on-site, the at-home GRE can be an acceptable substitute, but we are not sure that US universities will continue accepting the at-home GRE going forward once it's a bit safer to go back to on-site exams. So if you have the chance to take it on-site, that would be our recommendation.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience right now about the writing sample requirement. What are accepted forms or examples?
Sure, that's a great question. We are looking in terms of writing samples for polished work. It should be something that you've spent a significant amount of time writing, work editing, finishing. It shouldn't be something that is half done or that you did at the last minute. You are welcome to submit a writing sample of something you've submitted for an academic assignment, whether it's a publication, a final paper, a part of your thesis. We're looking for you to demonstrate what your academic writing capabilities are. Keep in mind, though, that we are looking to evaluate your own writing skills, and so we don't want to see writing samples that were co-authored with someone else, where it would be difficult for us to tell what you contributed versus someone else. So you should be the sole author. It's okay if you had an outside editor or if you had a friend proofread your work, but the writing sample should be demonstrative of your own writing abilities. And you should also be very careful, as always, to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism is a major concern both in the Fulbright selection process and for nominees who are applying to US universities. It's very important to make sure that you have properly attributed any text that you borrowed from other writers. If you got ideas from others, you need to cite the sources there, even if you put them in your own words. And that would go as well for a writing sample. Maybe you look at it and you realize, oh, this is a bit borderline as far as US expectations or definitions of plagiarism. We would want you to go in and edit that before you submit it to Fulbright.
In plagiarism, there is no coming back from it. If you are caught plagiarizing, you will be cut from the Fulbright program or the Fulbright application. Also, I should add that writing samples include any type. So if you don't have an undergrad research paper, you can feel free to submit an essay or a different, like a capstone project or something else that you did during your program. Another question. I'm applying for a master's degree in music. Do applicants studying art or music programs need to include a portfolio of audio or visual materials?
I'm going to say for the Fulbright application, it is going to vary a bit by country. You should certainly be prepared with one or be prepared with examples of your work, even if it's not necessarily assembled into a formal portfolio. You should have it available to submit if it's requested. And if you are nominated for a Fulbright grant and you do end up applying to US universities through Fulbright, you will definitely be expected to provide a portfolio to those universities. So it's best to just have it on hand ahead of time.
Great. Is there a resume template for the application you suggest?
There is not. You're welcome to use a free one that you find online. The things to keep in mind for resumes, first of all, US expectations are that your resume will be typically only 1 page, maybe 2 pages at the very most. In other countries, we understand that it's common to have a longer resume, but in the US, for cultural and professional reasons here, employers and universities are looking for no more than 2 pages and preferably only 1. So we encourage you to find a template that will let you fit all of the relevant information that you need without going over in terms of length. You want to be efficient. It should be carefully formatted, read very carefully for typos, use consistent headings and fonts, but it's not necessary to use one specific template.
Thank you. On recommendation letters, does the system, does the student have to upload, or the applicant have to upload them, or do the recommenders upload them?
That's a great question. They need to be submitted directly by the recommenders to your Fulbright application. In most cases, the online Fulbright application will ask you for your recommender's contact information, and then they will get a standardized email saying that this student has asked you to provide a recommendation for their Fulbright application. Please log in at this website to submit your recommendation letter. We do not accept letters that are submitted directly from the applicants.
Is professional experience required to apply?
Again, sorry to keep saying this, it depends on what country you're from. A lot of the time, no. So certainly don't walk away from this feeling like if you don't have professional experience, there's no purpose even continuing. I do know though that there are a couple of countries at least that require work experience for MBA programs in particular. There may be some others that are not coming to my mind right now. So we encourage you to review the eligibility guidelines on the website of the Fulbright Commission or the AMIDEAST field office that you're applying through. And it will be stated there very clearly whether any particular fields or any particular applicants are required to have work experience. If it's not mentioned there, then you can assume that you're not required to have work experience.
And I can also add that sometimes having work experience makes you a stronger applicant. We actually have many applicants who apply more than once, and some of our current Fulbrighters have applied 2 to 3 times. Some of them applied right when they finished their bachelor's degree, and some applied after a couple of year work experience. And they can attest that having work experience and working professionally can increase your application and show your skills and what you really want to do with the rest of your career. One of our other questions is, do you have any advice on the personal statement?
Sure. I think I come from a background in graduate admissions. I used to work for US universities reading graduate applications from international students. Now I work with Fulbright nominees. And I think the most common mistake I see on personal statements is that applicants use the personal statement to reiterate or repeat information that's already in the rest of their application. They might summarize their resume, they might point out their strong grades, they might highlight someone who's recommending them that they feel is very prestigious or carries a lot of weight. And in reality, the statement of purpose or the personal statement is your opportunity to add information that's not reflected elsewhere in your application. So whether that's briefly mentioning an area of weakness that you feel you want to address, like I said earlier, perhaps you think your grades don't demonstrate your abilities. You don't want to write an entire essay on that subject, but you could briefly mention that and mention what evidence you have to show that you would be a stronger student in the US. For Fulbright specifically, we are especially interested in those essays in hearing how the Fulbright experience, not just a master's degree, but a master's degree through Fulbright in the United States as a cultural exchange program, how that would benefit your future career and also your home community. What will this enable you to contribute to your home community after the Fulbright program? Because this is a cultural exchange program where we want to bring students here, have them experience American culture, share their culture with Americans, but then go back to their home community and share their American experience with their home community. So we want to hear that you have a vision for doing that, not just that the master's degree would enhance your professional career, although we certainly hope that it will do that. We would like to hear how you plan to use this degree and this Fulbright experience to benefit or contribute to your home community in the future.
Yeah, and we just got another question that's added on right there asking about, can we mention what our country and the situation our country finds ourselves in the study objective, and how that makes you want to help your country return. So I can answer that also going what Anna said. Yes, you can mention the situation of your community and what situation you find yourself in personally with if it's during the pandemic or during anything else going on. And yes, we do want to hear about how you're going to help your community once you return home. How will this impact your career? How will you help others? That is one of the crown jewels of Fulbright. We are very, very focused on community service, and we have many volunteering opportunities in the US as well once you get here. Do I need to offer an English certificate when applying? I've heard there will be an English course if accepted. Can you talk, Anna, maybe a little bit the long-term English program?
Sure. Again, the expectation for proof of English proficiency, what you might mean by an English certificate, that depends on what country you're applying from. Some countries say, yes, you have to have taken an exam. Some say, no, you don't have to take the exam yet. There are cases where nominees who are otherwise very strong candidates but don't have strong English language skills yet can be selected for a preparatory English program. Those range in length anywhere from 3 weeks to 8 months, depending on how much English training you need. But you would need to be selected as a semi-finalist before we would place you into one of those programs. So you would be notified that you've been selected as a Fulbright semi-finalist. You would attend an orientation, either in person or maybe on Zoom this year, to explain to you what to expect from this process. And then you would be asked to take the TOEFL again under the auspices of Fulbright. Even if you took it before, we would have you take it again. And the results of that exam would determine your eligibility for potential English language training in the US. So this isn't necessarily something that you can choose for yourself simply because you feel that the English program would be beneficial to you, or maybe we ask you to do it and you think, no, I don't need that, I won't do that. This is built into the Fulbright nomination process. But if we do feel that you have strong potential as a Fulbright candidate and the only thing that you need is investment from Fulbright in your English language skills, you can be selected and funded to participate in an English training program.
Thank you. I think we answered this question already. If you have a master's degree, yes, you are eligible to apply for Fulbright. Just explain how the second master's will impact your career. Are current green card applicants to the United States eligible to apply?
The answer to that is no. Sorry. The reasoning is that Fulbright is a cultural exchange program, and the visa that is associated with Fulbright is an exchange visitor visa, meaning it cannot be used to immigrate to the US. And when you apply, you have to demonstrate to the US consulate or embassy that you have ties in your home community and you're planning to return. You are not using Fulbright as a way of trying to permanently come to the US to stay. So if you have a pending green card application, that means you have already applied to come to the US to stay. So it wouldn't be possible to either obtain a visa and you wouldn't be selected for Fulbright because we would see that you don't have the intention of returning to your home community afterwards.
And there is also a 2-year home residency requirement after you return home from your Fulbright program. Many countries have rules that say you must live in your home country for at least 2 years without moving to the US permanently, or sorry, even moving temporarily to the United States. And they take that very, very seriously. Do I need to get my bachelor's degree in my home country in order to apply?
Most often the answer is yes, except in cases of someone who has refugee status in a different country. Again, if you got your bachelor's degree in Syria, you may be eligible to apply for Fulbright through another country. But for the most part, for example, the Egyptian Fulbright program is looking to nominate Egyptian candidates who have earned their bachelor's degrees in Egypt and are currently residing in Egypt. So you're welcome to check with the Fulbright Commission or the AMIDEAST field office in your home country or your home region if you're not sure about this, but you should expect that the answer would probably be no, that you would have needed to earn a bachelor's in your home country or your home region in order to apply for Fulbright.
Thank you. Does Fulbright select applicants only on marks from college?
Definitely not. That is one of many factors that we consider, but it is not the only one. Besides the hard criteria like test scores and academic grades, those are things that are measurable and we can directly compare one applicant to another. we're looking at a lot of soft factors as well. We're looking at your essays, we're looking at your motivation for applying to Fulbright, for wanting to study in the US. We're looking for candidates who can clearly articulate how their Fulbright experience would contribute to their future career and their future community. We're looking for candidates with a demonstrated interest in cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural interaction. So we regularly nominate and bring Fulbright candidates who didn't have the highest GPAs in their pool of applications. And normally they succeed. They're very happy in the US, they get good grades, they have good experiences. But we selected them because we saw the potential in them to be good cultural ambassadors on behalf of their country or their home region. And we saw a willingness and an eagerness to interact with Americans and share their own culture with Americans. And that's a big part of the reason that we bring students to the US on Fulbright in the first place.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of questions coming in live. And so I think going on your last question, we have someone who asks, do I need to have a previous experience in volunteering?
Not necessarily, no. We would like to see that you have an interest in community service, that you have a motivation to serve other people, but you don't necessarily need to have a formal position in a volunteer organization. You definitely don't need to have a certain number of volunteer hours completed. We're looking more for your general aptitude for serving others and contributing to the community that you're in, rather than a specific background in formal volunteer activity.
Thank you. Do I need to submit a research proposal if I'm not planning to do research?
I have a hard time imagining a situation where that would be necessary if you're specifically in a non-research field. But the research proposal section of the application most likely would need to indicate what it is that you are planning on doing during your time in the US. Perhaps you're not planning on spending time in a lab or spending time in the library, but the research proposal is a broader indication of what are you planning to do academically in the United States. So it doesn't necessarily refer only to formal academic research, but it refers to your academic interests and what you plan to do if you are admitted to a master's degree in the United States.
Thank you. What documents do I need to get translated?
You would need to check with, again, everybody's favorite answer, the Fulbright Commission or the AMIDEAST field office where you're applying. It depends a lot on the type of document and also which entity is accepting your application. So please do check online, and if it's not clear to you, there will always be a contact person or a contact address that you can reach out to for clarification.
And if you're in a country that doesn't have an AMIDEAST office or a Fulbright Commission, you can also reach out to the U.S. Embassy. On the websites, they tend to have information on the Fulbright program on each embassy page. One more question from this list that we're getting in. Well, who should I ask to write my recommendation letters, and how many do I need?
Usually we're looking for 3 letters of recommendation, and ideally all 3 of them would be academic references. They're professors that you had, research mentors that you had during your bachelor's degree. In some cases, if you have an extensive amount of professional experience, or if you have really been out of your bachelor's degree program for a while, 5, 6, 10 years, to the point that you would have a hard time finding professors who remember you well enough to write a detailed recommendation, it can be appropriate to use usually only one professional recommendation in place of academic letters. If you are thinking of using a professional recommendation, you should make sure that you request it from someone who is a supervisor or otherwise has the ability to speak objectively to your professional capacities. Colleagues are usually not the strongest recommenders, even if they think highly of your work. Just in terms of the weight that we would give to a recommendation from a colleague, it is less than the weight we would give to a recommendation from a supervisor. And the same is true for academic recommendations. I know it's in a lot of countries outside the US, there's a lot of emphasis on the importance or the social status or the notoriety of the person who's doing the recommending. They say it's much better to have a dean write you a recommendation than a tutor from a class or just one professor. And in the US, we don't tend to see it like that. We actually are looking for recommenders who know you very well, who can give us detailed feedback about your performance, about what you're like as a student, we are not so concerned with the title or the status of the person who's writing the letter. So given a choice between a vague recommendation from the dean of your school saying this person was a good student, I think she would be a good Fulbrighter, versus a detailed letter from the assistant in the lab where you conducted your bachelor's research, giving us an idea of this person took on an interesting research project, she was independent, she works well with her colleagues, I think that she would do well in an American lab setting. We would give much more emphasis to that second letter, even though that person doesn't have the title of the dean. We would like to see and hear from someone who knows you well and can write in detail about your qualifications.
We've gotten a couple more questions from the chat that I'm going to ask you now before we end. What will the interview be about if you are selected as a semifinalist?
Again, I'm going to assume this varies depending on your country. I work specifically with Egypt, and I can't speak to everybody's interviews. I would say that you should be prepared to discuss your background and your qualifications. Be prepared to answer questions about the nature of your bachelor's degree, what you studied, but primarily you should be prepared to discuss your motivation for applying to Fulbright, your plans or your hopes or your dreams if you are nominated and receive a Fulbright grant. You should be prepared to talk about how your vision for your study would contribute to your home community after your program. So a lot of those soft factors that I mentioned earlier, the interview will be a chance to kind of fill in some of the gaps in your application. The committee will have read all of your materials very closely. They will have noted questions they have, whether something seems inconsistent or a piece of information is missing, or they might just ask you to elaborate on something. They say, we like this idea of yours about X, could you tell us more about that? So it's typically not necessary to prepare a presentation or any kind of formal, to be prepared for a very formal, strict format for the interview. It's more important to be, sorry, losing my train of thought. It's more important to be familiar with the materials that are in your application, be prepared to discuss any areas of weakness, and also be prepared to, again, explain how this Fulbright grant and the Fulbright program would benefit you and your community.
Yeah, and I also can add that on your personal statement in your interview, we also want to know what makes you unique, and you want to know what you're passionate about. So tell us why you love your studies. We want to know why you love this career path. We're not looking for the same cookie cutter person that everyone has. We don't want to know just that you're a top student. We want to really know what makes you you, and why you're passionate about the subjects you love. Here's a question. I have a two-part question. One, can you apply for PhDs in the US through Fulbright? And if you finish your master's degree with Fulbright, can you apply for PhDs afterwards in the United States?
Right, so the first question first. For the most part, Fulbright in the MENA region supports master's degrees, typically 2 years. There are not a lot of instances where we consider applications for PhDs. You're welcome to double check the information on the website for your host community, your embassy, your Fulbright commission. But for the most part, we will be looking for candidates for 2-year master's degrees in the United States. The question about transferring or continuing to a PhD, the Fulbright priority is bringing you or bringing the Fulbright grantees to the US for that cultural experience and then having them return home to share it. There are some instances where you can be approved to stay in the US for 3 to 4 more years to pursue a PhD if you're offered admission. In that case, the 2-year home residency requirement, it gets moved to the end of the PhD program. It doesn't go away, but we say, okay, instead of spending 2 years in your home community immediately at the end of Fulbright, you can do it at the end of your PhD program 3 or 4 years from now. So you shouldn't come into Fulbright expecting that it will be a guaranteed pathway to getting a US PhD. You should be looking at Fulbright as a unique cultural experience and that will benefit you when you come home immediately afterwards. But there are instances where students who have performed well in Fulbright and demonstrated that they are still committed to going back to their home country can be approved to stay in the US for a period of time after, longer, to finish a PhD and hopefully be even better prepared to serve their communities after that.
This is a question from an Algerian student or Algerian applicant. My apologies. The GRE and TOEFL is very expensive in Algeria. Are the tests mandatory before being selected or shortlisted?
You would need to check the website for the Algerian Fulbright program. I am not sure what Algeria looks for as far as application requirements. I can tell you, as Alex mentioned earlier, that if you are nominated for Fulbright, if you become a semifinalist, the exam expenses at that point would be funded by Fulbright. There's no cost to the applicant. So unfortunately, we don't have funding or financial aid for taking exams prior to applying to Fulbright, but you should check because not all countries, not all programs require both exams before you apply. Some don't even require one exam. You can just apply with whatever materials you already have.
And I believe for Algeria, the requirements are listed on the U.S. Embassy in Algiers webpage. I'm a fourth-year engineering student. I'm applying to the Fulbright Scholarship. This application requires four academic records, and I get my fourth academic records by July 2021, which is after the due of the applications. Can I add it later to the application once I get it from my university?
Usually, yes. We would want you to submit whatever documentation you do have from your fourth year, even if it's a mid-year grades report or a list of the courses that you are enrolled in. Your application should be as complete as it can be at this time. But in most cases, yes, the Fulbright Committee would be willing to review the grades and the courses that you have already completed and allow you to submit new materials later.
Thank you. And so for our very last question, can public school teachers apply for masters? Oh, we have two more, sorry.
I can't think of any reason why not. Yeah, I would say education is certainly a field that we fund. We have grantees here studying various types of education. It is a little more common for applicants to apply for teaching programs in English, perhaps, or even teaching foreign languages. We have someone here, I believe, who's studying teaching Arabic as a second language. But if there's a master's field in the US that's relevant to you, where you would have the necessary qualifications and background to be admitted to that program, you would certainly be welcome to apply to Fulbright, yes.
And there's also programs in the US in international education, education administration. There's a wide variety of programs in the US, so you can definitely do some research online. There's also the Fulbright Teachers Grant. So if you put that into Google, you can find more about the Fulbright Teachers Program. Our last question is there any chance we won't be accepted by a university, even if our application has been accepted to Fulbright? So if you're a semifinalist for Fulbright, is there a chance you won't get accepted into a university in the US?
I'm sorry to end this Q&A on a sad note, but the answer is yes. Fulbright can't guarantee that you will be admitted to any US university. We can't guarantee that you will receive a grant, even if you are admitted. So the process you're in right now is the competition to be nominated for Fulbright. And if you are nominated to Fulbright, if you become a semifinalist, then you start another competition, both competing with graduate applicants in the United States who are also applying to your programs of interest and competing against other Fulbright semifinalists. So we do everything we can to bring as many semifinalists to the US as we can. We work constantly behind the scenes. We talk to universities. If they have concerns about an application, the program officer might call them and discuss. So we do everything we can to facilitate admission to US universities. We do everything we can to steer semifinalists toward universities where they're likely to be admitted and likely to be placed for Fulbright. But ultimately, yes, you would see this if you receive a nomination, if you become a semifinalist. There are some terms and conditions that you're required to accept in order to start the next phase of the process. And one of those terms is that you understand that you're not guaranteed to receive a Fulbright grant, you're not guaranteed to travel to the United States. It's becoming a semifinalist means you have moved from the first phase to the second phase, but it doesn't ultimately guarantee that you will get beyond that.
Thank you. Before we finish, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to especially thank Anna for answering all of our applicants' questions. Just a quick reminder that you can learn more about the program, including eligibility, how to apply, and deadlines on our website at amideast.org/Fulbright. I also highly encourage you to follow us on social media to learn more about Fulbrighters in the MENA region, as well as follow the Fulbright program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also learn more about the program generally at eca.state.gov/Fulbright. Well, thank you very much, and we hope to hear from you all soon.
Yes, thank you.